One of the roles that I have, in addition to being CFO, is I've actually also been on the audit committee at my church, All Saints South Burlington, for the last 3 years. So as I'm talking to you about this, I'm also have been doing this work for the last few years. Going forward, I'm the treasurer at All Saints. So I won't be on the audit committee because the treasurer and the cannot be on the audit committee. You can't audit your own work. But I'll go ahead and I'm going to just cover a couple of things real quick. One is that if I'm not directly facing my microphone and camera, it can be difficult to hear me. So if I forget to look straight ahead and you can't understand what I'm saying, interrupt me and let me know, and I'll straighten up real quick. Also, for those of us that are on Zoom a lot, we may know, but some don't, that if you want to ask a question, there's a button at the bottom of your screen called React, where if you click on that, there's a toggle there that says raise hand. So see, a little hand showed up on my screen, and then you can lower your hand. So if you want to ask a question, that's how I'll know, instead of just trying to shout it out. And also, if you want to share information about what you're doing with the group without necessarily interrupting, you can also put it in the chat. So for instance, I'm very interested in knowing what financial systems everybody's using, whether it's QuickBooks or Realm or something else. So if you want to put into chat what system you're using so that everybody can be aware of that, that would be very helpful. All right, so I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint presentation and then share my screen. So what we're going to be talking about this evening, where to locate the audit materials that we use in the diocese, the role of the Commission on Finance in this process, getting yourself ready for the audit, what parish records you're going to need, the checklist on internal controls, audit steps, and that's a little high level. It's, it has to be, you'll have to think through what that means for your church, completing the audit and then submitting it. Hopefully we will not be here the full allotted time because that's way too much. But we'll see how it goes, and if you have any questions along the way. All right, so how many of you have actually been on the diocesan website and can navigate around on the website? Okay, I see some hands. It can be difficult to find things, right? So the materials that you're going to need, if you go to the menu bar across the top, you'll see resources for leaders, and then you follow the drop-down menus to congregational resources and then finance and audit. That'll take you to the audit section of the website, and there are multiple links there to files that you're going to need to download. Those are the cover page, the audit certification, the checklist for internal controls, and the procedure for completion. So those are fillable forms. So if you prefer, you can print them out and handwrite it in, but you can also just type into the documents to complete them. That website will also refer you back to the chair of the Commission on Finance for questions. And the Commission on Finance is responsible for making sure that every parish completes their audit. So the committee chair is Reverend Melanie Combs. She intended to be with us tonight, but she has another commitment. And then there are 5 other elected members, plus the bishop and 2 diocesan staff. And I will say, now that I've got your names, when it comes time for new members on that Commission on Finance, I'm probably going to say, hey, is anyone talk to, say, Jeanette or Richard or George? Maybe they're interested. I'll try not to put anybody on the spot there. Once you send in your parish audit, they actually review, someone on the commission reviews every single one of them. And they're going to reach out and ask you questions as necessary. So you'll be hearing from someone probably within a month or so of when you submit. And this is an active committee, and they also do handle the parochial reports and any grants and loans applications that are submitted to the diocese. All right, so getting ready for your audit. Your audit committee can be 2 to 3 people. It doesn't have to be a lot. And as I mentioned before, it can't be your treasurer. I'm wondering, of the folks that we've got gathered here, how many of you already have your audit committee selected and have gotten started with that? I see one hand. Jeanette, I think you told us before that you've got your team picked out.
We do.
So how many folks do you have on your team? Jeanette, I was just wondering how many people you have on your audit committee.
We have 4 people on our audit committee.
Oh, very good response. That's excellent. Richard, you raised your hand. You're on mute right now.
Can vestry members be on the audit committee?
Oh, absolutely.
Because I found a document somewhere that said they shouldn't be, but maybe that's not relevant for our diocese.
You know, we all hold so many different roles that if you exclude your vestry members from doing it, you may not have that many people available to you. The only one that's absolutely should not be on is the treasurer.
Okay.
And once you've got that team identified, you're going to have to pick out which months you're going to audit, because you don't look at everything throughout the whole year, right? You're only going to look at 4 months worth of transactions. And December and January are required just to make sure that the year end is handled appropriately. But you have to pick 2 other months, and it's recommended that you rotate those around from year to year. And I know the one thing that I've always done is pick the months that have big fundraisers in them. So if you've got, a yard sale or a holiday bazaar or a pie sale or whatever, that brings in money, particularly money that is not pledge related, we typically choose that month, and almost always pick the Easter season, because there are a lot of donations that come in during that time as well. And then every year we'll just kind of rotate those around so that we cover most of the important months during the year. All right, so the records that you're going to need, this is where it matters what system you have, because every system calls their reports, they name them differently. In one system, a profit and loss statement can be called a statement of activities in another system. And so you definitely need to, when you're putting this list together for your treasurer and asking them for the reports, you're going to need to personalize this for whatever your system calls the report. Is anyone not using QuickBooks around? I'm interested to know if there's any I guess, outlier systems out there that we may not be too familiar with.
I think St. Paul's Virgins is using Quicken still.
Quicken, okay. And I'm hoping that everyone is actually using a system, but is there anyone here that's doing it manually? I haven't seen hands there, so that's very reassuring.
They may not be able to figure out how to get on this webinar if they're still doing their numbers manually. They may be a little technologically challenged.
All right, so Beth put a question in the chat, talking about December and January. It's December and January of the same year. So, so it would be 2025. Save the 2026 for next year. April Trinity has a team of 3. Thank you for your responses. I appreciate that. So on the records that you did, I wanted to point out that the vestry minutes is the only set of documents where you have to look at all the months, as opposed to just the 4 months that you've chosen to audit. And the reason for that is that any financial commitment the vestry chooses to make, that they've approved in the minutes, you need to follow through and see if they actually did it. Did they purchase what they said they were going to do? Did they perform the service they said they were going to do and spend that money? All right, Margaret, you've got a question?
I was just going to observe that even though no one, or presumably very few people, do things manually anymore, there's a fair amount of stuff that's in the audit instructions that reads as though we're doing stuff manually, like the mention of check stubs.
Yes. So we've had a conversation here about completely revising the audit materials for the next year. And that's something that takes quite a bit of time to do. So we are going to be tackling that over the next year so that that it's available probably at least 3 months prior to the due date. So that, which is typically when folks start working on this process. All right, Richard, do you have a question?
Yes, about the pledge tracking records. Pledge information is confidential. I would think that audit members are not supposed to see individual names in pledging. Our pledge records are in Realm, and only our pledge secretary has access to that. So I'm not quite sure how exactly what you mean by pledge tracking and how we would in Realm make that information accessible and maintain confidentiality.
It's truthfully, just as a practice, it's never a good idea for only one person to have access. Partly because, you know, with the proverbial somebody gets hit by a bus, you need to be able to access the information without too much difficulty. Plus, every financial system requires a level of oversight, such as an audit like this. And all financial records are confidential, I agree. The people that have been appointed to your audit committee, there should be one person on there that is given access to the information they need to verify that from the deposit for that particular time frame and the list of people who contributed against their pledge amount, that you can trace it into that Realm system to see that it was actually credited. Because face it, when people get their giving statements, they don't always go through and make sure they get credit for every single check they put in, right? So that audit step is just making sure that everybody got credit for those particular deposits and that it's not recorded under someone else's name. Because with people with similar names, we have seen it go under the wrong giver. And you also have to make sure that they're all recorded, that it's complete. All right, Shelley, you have a question?
Actually, that was our question. So that makes, you answered it for us. We were asking about pledge tracking as well. So we're all set. Thank you.
Okay, great. And Ray?
I don't know if we're in a unique situation or not, but we use a bookkeeping service. They write all of our checks and all invoices are forwarded to them for check writing after they've been approved. And we get a monthly printout from the service with all of the categories and vestry, and I'm not on the vestry. And when we have a priest, we review these on a monthly basis and we verify that everything that has come in and gone uh, has been justified, and we've got the backup material for it.
So in effect, you're doing your audit all throughout the year is what it comes down to. Because
Correct.
that's a huge part of it. So there are only a few steps that you would need to take to complete the audit. So you're way ahead of the game on that, to tell you the truth.
This came about that the last person who we had in as quote unquote church treasurer felt that it was getting more and more involved between IRS and the diocese. And the recommendation was to go with a professional service, which we did. And we've been using that service now for probably 10 to 12 years and have been very, very pleased with it.
That's great. You're with St. John's Randolph, is that right?
That is correct.
So that's great news. If someone else is interested in using a service like that, would you be willing to talk to them about your experience?
Yes, be more than happy to.
Thank you. So the first thing in the audit, really in the financial system, is ensuring that the financials are complete. And Ray, this kind of speaks to what you just talked about. You have to take a look at the number, the transactions that are recorded in the system and compare it to your bank statement. Every single thing has to be recorded, no matter how small. And the best way to do that is to compare the two side by side and check them off. If your records are complete and nothing is missing, you're probably 85 to 90% of the way there to ensuring that your financial statements are materially accurate. And that's an accounting term. There are always going to be errors in financial statements. Errors are unavoidable. We're human. It happens. People do make mistakes. And an audit actually isn't designed to catch every single error that's out there. An audit is designed to make sure that systemic problems are identified and corrected. When you find, say for instance, that you're reconciling or you're comparing your bank records to your general ledger or your transaction listing, and you find that something has been transposed, a number's transposed, or a vendor name is not entered correctly, or it's put to an incorrect account. Those are potential findings for your audit report. If it happens once, that's an error, not a big deal. If you see a pattern of that happening, then that becomes an audit finding. So as you're going through and you're checking these off, just keep a listing of the things that you're seeing, because you're going to want to talk to your treasurer about that. Chances are they've also found it and corrected it in a later month. But it's recognizing whether a pattern of error exists or not. And I will say that now that things are getting more modern, as we kind of spoke about before, electronic transactions that come directly through your bank account are very easy to miss, and they're very easy to misrecord. We've got e-giving now, we've got ACH transactions, direct transfers between accounts. We've got debit cards, and debit cards are pretty notorious for having unusual transactions. Margaret, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just a little baffled by what you've been saying the last 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay.
Because QuickBooks tracks every transaction that goes out of the bank. It I mean, I check in every day or two. It downloads all the transactions from the bank, all the money that goes into the bank, all the money that comes out of the bank. We don't have any money that's not in the bank. So
So
for a
that's,
human to go through and like manually check off 200 transactions
Yeah.
seems a little silly when that is exactly what QuickBooks is designed to do and does.
and the reason for that is every version of QuickBooks is not the same. You've got apparently the online version, and it is linked to your bank account.
Right.
A number of people that use QuickBooks have desktop versions that are not linked to their bank accounts.
Oh, I see.
And then there are also folks that are using Realm that may or may not be linked to bank accounts, or then, a third unknown system that's the same way. So these, the audit steps are designed to cover all of those eventualities.
Got it.
Right. So like you say, if you're in a more sophisticated setup, right, that is certainly very old school. And it kind of like what Ray was saying, or this work is being done in another way. If you're certain that your bank accounts are reconciled and that there is a direct correlation between what's on that bank statement and what's in your system, then you can sign off on those steps saying without having to print anything out and do that check off. Everybody else that doesn't have that link to their bank account will need to do that.
Okay. In that case, I strongly recommend everybody use QuickBooks Online.
It is a good system. It is a good system. So I agree, but there's a cost to it, as with anything else. All right, Richard, do you have a question? Oh, you're on mute.
You'd think I hadn't never used Zoom before. We don't do anything with paper. All our invoices are PDFs and things. And so again, I've seen some of the auditing in the past. I've never been involved with our auditing, and they have boxes of paper. And I think it would be silly for me to have to produce boxes of paper for the audit because I don't deal with paper. I get PDFs from my vendors, and I put PDFs in Realm, and the bank pays, and there's no paper anywhere.
And that's fine because auditing can be done with electronic records just as easily as it can be done with paper. As long as you make those records available to your audit team, perfectly fine.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question too. Margaret, are you still the treasurer at St. Barnabas?
Yes.
So in order for the audit to be certified, does someone other than Margaret need to be checking these records? Or in our case, Rich? Is Rich allowed to check the records the way Margaret does, or do we need a special audit person who's doing that?
There should be an audit person that does confirm that, yes.
Yeah, if I can respond, was that Bev?
Yes.
We do have auditors, and we're just trying to figure out what's a sensible procedure to enable them to check, like Lisa said, how the system works and like all the parts that make sense for them to check without my printing out boxes full of paper, which I totally agree with Rich.
Nobody wants you to do that, I can assure you. Yeah, so as we go through this, Margaret, that's it'll be interesting to note where in your mind you're saying, hey, we need to do our audit a little differently. Because next year, when we have the revised procedures, right, we're going to take into account those that are on a more sophisticated setup than those that are still primarily paper-based.
Yeah. I can comment if I'll say just one more thing, which is that there are ways to get QuickBooks Online a lot cheaper than the commercial version. We use something called, what's it called? There's a
Is it
it'll come to
TechSoup?
me.
Is it
TechSoup, that's
TechSoup?
right. We use
Yeah.
TechSoup, which reduces the cost a lot. And then there's also a consultant that is fantastic, that is also very cheap. Specifically for QuickBooks for nonprofits.
So kind of moving on to the next section in the audit, which is revenue. This kind of gets back to the pledge records that we were speaking about before, right? The bulk of your incoming revenue for most churches is going to be pledge revenue. But you're also going to have rental income, dividends from the unit fund, and then other things for, flower contributions, your memorial garden contributions, any number of things that are coming in and recorded in your bank deposits. And as you go through those deposits, you're going to need to trace that revenue back from the total deposit to the proper income accounts in your general ledger, because it makes a difference whether you've got them recorded properly as operating revenue or non-operating, because that has implications then, of course, on how you complete your parochial report and how your assessment will get calculated for the following year. So it's very important that you make sure that all of that is recorded in the proper buckets. And then we talked about the pledge records already. And I think everybody hopefully understands the reasoning behind that there absolutely has to be more than one set of eyes on the pledge records. And that doesn't give you too much heartburn. All right, so for your expenses, and this is something, again, the way this is written, of course, it is kind of leans towards the manual record side because it talks about check copies. But they can be in, an electronic form. And in a lot of cases, it's just a record of an electronic record of what you've sent either to your bank or to bill.com or another service that you use to send that payment out on your behalf. But you still do need to make sure that the system is tracking them in order and that you're not missing any, regardless of what method you're using to pay your vendors. And you have to make sure that if any of those don't clear the bank in a reasonable amount of time, that you ensure that that's either been voided in your system, or that you replace that payment to your vendor. A vendor that does not cash a check that comes to them, or they have a mistake with their bank and the electronic payment doesn't get to them, is still owed that money. And you can't just ignore it if it doesn't clear your bank. And that's actually, that information is actually reported on an annual basis to the states so that they know, it's like, you've seen those advertisements. Do you have money that you're owed that's on some random list somewhere? Well, it's a check you never deposited. And they still owe it to you no matter how long it's been. So you have to keep your eye on that. And again, you have to make sure that your expenses are put into the proper account in your financial system for that same operating expense versus non-operating expense. That coding matters when you're putting your financials together and your assessment gets calculated for the following year. And then there's just reasonableness. Are the expenses reasonable? Is this what you expected? Is it an unusual item that should have vestry approval? If so, go take a look to see if it actually did get that approval. It's that type of check for the reasonableness is very important. Now, on payroll, there are a number of ways to handle payroll. We've got probably 8 or 9 that are now using the centralized payroll service that we're offering here at the diocese. We have a lot of people who are using an outside service. We have a few that are still manually calculating and writing in payroll checks. Okay. So if you're using a service or the diocesan centralized payroll, right, a lot of this stuff gets handled for you. You hire somebody and they're working directly with that payroll company to get all their forms done, right? And it's the same thing. Well, they're doing it for us. We're sure they're doing it, but someone on your audit committee still needs to audit and double check that those processes were followed. Because, like I said, mistakes get made even by your service providers. So it does still need to be verified that your quarterly payroll reports are filed. It needs to be verified that the information put in them agrees to what's in your system. So in these instances where you're using a service, you're going to have to ask them to provide you with that information if you don't have a login and can pull it yourself. So, how many folks, Margaret, and I bet you're going to tell me that you're using an outside service, but how many folks are doing this in-house?
Holy Trinity Swanton uses CompuCount.
You could have heard of them. I've not used them. No. So, anyone else on that? QuickBooks payroll. Yeah, it is great.
So Lisa, will the diocese send me a quarterly payroll report, this Form 941? Because I'm using the centralized diocese payroll now, and I haven't received any quarterly reports.
So we've are doing one consolidated report for that. But there is a report that we can send that shows the breakdown for each church. So we would have just done the most recent one. So you've probably come on in the last quarter, I would imagine. And so the one for Q2 would have just recently been done. But we can provide that.
So I'll receive that as an email from the diocesan office.
Yes, Margaret Shadow is the one that handles all of that. So she'll be sending it out.
Very good. Thank you.
I'm just making a note on that to make sure. And receives the W-2 at the end. I didn't know I meant to be for vendors, right? We need to be sending them a 1099 at year end. That's also something that needs to be checked. The good news is that the cutoff for the last several years has been $600. That for 2026 is being raised to $2,000. So you don't have to issue a 1099 until you've paid a contractor more than $2,000. So that should help alleviate that year-end burden a little bit. So as you get towards, after you've looked through all of the transactions and have a good feel for whether you've got any findings that need to be discussed with your treasurer. You need to review the financial statements as a whole, and kind of get out of the weeds and take a look at the big picture and compare that against your budget. If there is a significant variance to budget on any line item, that needs to be explained, because obviously your budget showed your intentions at the beginning of the year. And if that's not how the year shaped up, hopefully there have been conversations throughout the year with both the vestry and potentially with the full congregation if it's a significant variance, so that it shouldn't be a surprise once you've gotten to this point. So that's a very important review that needs to be done. And then the balance sheet. Typically, there's not much changes on your balance sheet other than your bank balances going up and down. Occasionally, you might get a new endowment from someone that gets added. But if you take out a loan from the diocese or a financial institution, you need to make sure that all that's recorded. But those are really big items, right? That should be very clear to everyone as they're happening. So hopefully nobody gets surprised. If you have any stories of being surprised, I'm not sure I even want to hear it, because that would that would be a huge audit finding. And then, as we mentioned, reviewing the vestry minutes. Did the vestry do, or did the staff follow up and carry out the instructions that the vestry had intended? Did your buildings and grounds team buy that new lawn? You know, did the roof repair happen? Did you do a capital campaign to fix something, and are you holding the funds for the work to be done at a later date? There are a lot of things that gets discussed in the vestry meeting that need to be followed up on, and anything that is not followed through on should be noted in the findings and the reason why. So once you have your findings written up, and again, hopefully it's not as surprising, you've covered it with your treasurer, you've gotten all the explanations, and you give this information to your vestry. They need to review it along with any recommendations and make sure it's included in the approved minutes for the meeting. I'm interested to know for folks who have done their audits previously, if they have had any findings that they've written, and what type of things have they noted before.
I'm not necessarily showing that I'm raising my hand, so I have something on the previous screen. I've always found it easier to check the vestry minutes first because of the internal control list questions. There are questions on there that you need to know what's in the minutes in order to answer correctly the internal control checklist questions. For example, the one that says that all financial operations were voted on. That's one of them that you need to have seen the records to know that.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And I will say that we're not, in my experience, we don't always have them saved nice and neatly where you can find them. So every now and then we have to go track down a month and make sure it's saved in its right folder on the server. That's kind of why I've got it at the last, because every now and then it takes us a minute to get them all. But you're right. The checklist for internal controls does ask a lot of questions where reviewing the vestry minutes at the beginning of your process would be very helpful. So I was wondering that, has anyone had any findings that they've written up in the past couple of years that they'd be willing to share? So I can give you a couple. We've had unused bank accounts that have very small dollars in them, that there is no point in having them anymore. So one of our findings was a recommendation to close that account and consolidate the funds in with the operating account. That was one. There is in the internal control checklist kind of a questions that were related to understanding the contents and the inventory of all your property, not just the buildings, but all of the property and things that are inside the church. And one of our findings was to make sure that a video of the entire property was taken so that, in case of some type of a catastrophic event, we have a record of everything that the church has, a visual record, and we can properly file an insurance claim. Right. So those are a couple of things. And then every now and then we do find something along the lines of a pledge was recorded under the wrong name. And we just need to make sure that there is a review process that is followed, and we put that process in place, and we're good going forward. So things like that. Does anyone else? There's no judgment here. If you'd like to share something that that you've come across in your experience, we'd be very happy to hear about it. All right. So no volunteers there, which is fine.
We'll share.
Okay,
This is Helen.
right. This is Helen. Well, we found a couple of things. One was that checks weren't being cashed in a timely manner because we have a paid bookkeeper who comes in every week or every 2 weeks to do stuff, and because the envelopes from the offering, the counters don't open them. They just say how many envelopes because of confidentiality. And so they have to be opened with another witness, and the thing of getting the two people together was holding things up. So we made a recommendation that they need to come up with a better solution, and so that there would be two people to open those up. That was one of the things we found. So we found something else, but it just went flying through my brain. The train is on a different track.
So that's interesting because that's the second time that we've talked about confidentiality with the pledges, and I think certain churches are taking that a step or two further than others are.
Yes.
Yes.
Right. So and you might be making things hard for yourself. There should never, like we talked about before, there should never be just one person responsible for the pledge accounting. But when you're doing a weekly count, right, and you're going through, and there always does need to be two people for that process.
We have two people that do it. One of them is the church secretary. The other one is the church bookkeeper. But the church bookkeeper is not there every day. She was only coming in once or twice a week. And so people started to complain that, oh, I gave my pledge and it's been 2 weeks and no one's cashed the check yet. So we had to do a new process where the bookkeeper was coming in more often to cash the checks and do the deposit and such more often than at least once a week.
Right.
Instead of every 2 weeks.
When the administrative assistant was there. But we don't, so we also have counters like every Sunday.
Yes.
Who count the cash and then how many envelopes. But people feel at our church, if people put it in an envelope, they don't want people to see it. And so the counters, who are people who are in church that Sunday, can't open those envelopes to say how much money's in the envelopes.
I see. Well, I think that your accommodation to have the bookkeeper come in, weekly and handle that is a good solution to that problem. I will say that our process is we no longer use envelopes because of the cost. So people just fold their check over when they put it in the basket. And they are recorded by the counters.
Right.
And our head counter is pledge treasurer, right? So of course she's the one that's familiar with everybody's pledge, but the second person that's counting is part of a small group that rotates. So that's never the same two people. Basically every time there's a new person that joins that group, it's like you cannot make any assumptions based on one check that you see from a person that particular week. You can't make an assumption about what their annual pledge is. And everything has to be kept confidential. So we've got a small team that does that. Our bookkeeper actually is not, I won't put it that way. Our administrative assistant is not involved in that process. So there are many ways to do this, and what works for your church, as long as you've got that dual oversight, will be fine. So Margaret, you got your hand up?
Well, I was going to share a finding. So last year, one of our audit committee members is also the person who maintains our organ and is very knowledgeable about that. And he was very interested in this building inventory and raised the question about how is the organ listed in our building inventory. Because he said sometimes insurance companies want to consider it part of the building. And if you've got a pipe organ, it might be worth $100,000 or a lot more and should not be considered part of the building. It's equipment within the building and should be listed separately. So that's kind of on the list for the current year to kind of follow up and make sure that inventory is done right.
I had never even considered that before, so thank you for bringing that up. We've never had that discussion that I'm aware of.
That's why I said it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. All right, Bev, you've got a question?
One of the things that we've been noticing is that since we went to electronic giving, it makes it much harder to track the donations to rentals, flowers, things like that. Rentals, not so much, but like flowers and memorial accounts, because what we see on the counter sheets, what we see in the treasurer's records, and then every month our vestry sees our budget goal and where we are at that time, both for the whole year where we are in terms of the amount, and then also for the month. So if we look at that month, the amount of money that went into flowers is always higher on that budget sheet than it is on the other records because of the electronic giving. Is there some kind of special record we should be requesting from Realm in order to be able to track the online giving to those categories?
You can set up multiple categories in Realm. So when they're, I guess, doing their online donation, there's a drop down that they could then pull that says, I'm donating for altar flowers, for an Easter or a Christmas donation, my regular pledge. And you can have a drop down. There's multiple line items that can be set up.
Our contributions treasurer has that. But when we go to look at the overall records don't necessarily catch the online giving and put it into they catch it, but we have no way of seeing the difference between what we recorded and our treasurer's records show and then what appears on the budget statement. The budget statement part is always higher because there's been online giving that we haven't seen a record for until that.
Okay. Are you using Rome for your financial system as well as the giving system?
Well, we're using it for the first time this year. So
Okay.
this was our previous Power Church program.
I see. I see. I would say, because I can help with the setup on Realm. I'm not familiar with Power Church, but if you're off of it now, I guess the problem is inadvertently solved.
Bev, that's a good point. And I think we can fix it ourselves. We'll have to talk with Dee, because I think that's right, that if we were getting some Vanco online giving that was not pledge, but was for something else, we might not see it the way we're tracking it now. So, but we'll take care of this on our end.
All right. If you need any help with that, just let us know, because we're familiar with it at the diocese as well. So just let us know if you need any assistance with that. All right. So once we've gotten through the findings and the review with your vestry, it's just a matter of completing all of those forms and sending it on to us here at the diocese. Now the due date is September 1st, and that's very unfortunate. That's published in everything, because we have to then turn around and provide information to the national church based on the audit, the parochial reports and the audits. And we have 30 days from that date to get that done. So we're probably moving that going forward. We're probably moving that September 1 date forward by a month or two to give us enough time here to consolidate everything. Just keep that in the back of your mind for next year. But once you are done and you've filled out all the information on the forms, I'm very sorry that you do have to send the forms and it's not completely electronic. And it goes to Margaret Schotta with her email address here. She will keep at it like a bulldog until you have submitted. She's got the checklist. We've already got, I think, 6 or 7 of them in from various churches. And she will keep reminding you until we receive yours. Of that, you can be certain. And that's pretty much the entire process. Is there anything that you'd like to cover that we haven't talked about this evening so far?
I was able to send in a document rather than paperwork, because those particular pieces that I was not able to copy and add into my document, I scanned and then put into a document. So everything, it is possible to send everything electronically without a paper copy, if you're willing to scan and copy into an entire document.
That is very true. And yeah, keep in mind that and we've talked about it. We have some folks that just are not terribly computer literate, and they have to go to friends or family to email things to us. So we do actually still occasionally get paper copies in the mail, and we will accept those and scan it ourselves, as well as taking your electronic copies. So this will be available within the next 48 hours for folks that might want to listen to it again, or to share with other members of your audit team. So thank you very much for participating. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.